experiences when I was a kid. My very first records were these storybook read along records that my mother uh, would get me because she thought it would foster an interest in reading. That was one way to get kids interested. Or I think she read that somewhere, so she said, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna try this out on air." Um, I love those, so I would definitely just escape into them for hours and hours and hours. The idea of having a a story, the illustrations, the text, the the soundtrack music and the sound design and the voice acting, all that stuff was just in there. So I could really just escape into those stories forever as a child. As I grew up, I could never really separate the two really. It was always like a multi-dimensional experience sort of.
That's really cool. It's really amazing how that, influences us as we get further along in our careers.
Mm.
I would agree. I've storytelling. It started young with books as well. It's
Hmm.
who I am and music as well. So I completely understand that sentiment. It's amazing.
Yeah.
As we know, 2023, it's actually the 50th anniversary of hip hop. And
Yes.
we know scratching is one of the elements, one of the pieces of the whole genre itself. And I wanted to know, what are some evolutions of that skill set of scratching that you think has evolved from before today?
Um, at its core, I think it's still there. I think the ethos is still there. The idea that you're supposed to twist your own personality into something. You have access to whatever equipment you have access to, and your influences and the stuff that you like, and try to collide all those universes together in your own style, so to speak. For me, I think scratching in terms of a in or the turntable in terms of an instrument has always been that chameleon. I mean, that's what inspired me to pick it up in the first place. The kids that were doing all the turntable work in the late 80s and stuff, it just kind of, I don't know, it kind of opened all these windows and all these other possibilities. And then as far as my work is concerned, I think I continue to hold that torch of just exploring, just seeing where else I can bring scratching and the turntable. On this album especially, I think the idea of it being, it, well, just not just like a lead soloing instrument, but also a background or a support instrument, or like a background vocalist would use, or a keyboardist or something like that. The way I was trying to work on these tracks was just thinking in terms of, um, if everybody in the band was playing their regular role on a regular instrument, how would that feel if they were all creatures with turntables and stuff?
And it's funny you mentioned that because I think about with use of TikTok and other apps, we're seeing a lot of mixing and mashups and also sampling and old hip hop beats influences are influencing everybody and songs artists today. And I wanted to know with that, watching that art that's scratching, is it gonna the original sense of it? Do you think it's making a comeback? Is it going to?
I think like any scene, there's just always going to be these hardcore kids that just get into it. I'm one of them. I'm a lifer. I don't think there's stuff I hear in my head that I can't technically pull off yet, and I practice, turntables daily. So it's one of those things where I feel like, if you just watch Thelonious Monk and or Louis Armstrong in their later careers, you see the level of mastery and nuance that they're able to play with. Um, at that age, it's kind of just, you have more stories to tell, you have more time on your instrument, it becomes more just a part of your DNA sort of. So
Mhm.
for me, I don't know, I think whether it's making a comeback or not, or whether it's in the limelight or not, I think the people that have always been pushing the that craft forward were doing it regardless of whether anyone was listening. Like I started my first almost decade of scratching was just in my bedroom by myself. Just no one was listening. It was just sort of putting the time in and seeing where I could bring it.
Mhm.
Um but is it making a comeback? I don't know. I think anything where you can feel that spirit behind it, the human element. I think scratching has always been a very tactile uh thing to do, perform, and also to experience just watching it. When you're seeing it, there's a lot of physicality to playing the instrument. And I think that's always just that doesn't really go out of style when you're just seeing somebody going for it and doing their thing and having a good time with it. I think that's just inspiring, whether you technically understand what's happening or not. It's kind of secondary, but um I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question. I guess I don't really pay attention to whether it's like a trendy thing to do or a not trendy thing to do. All I know is like when I was introduced to the whole turntable scene and what those scratch DJs were doing in the late 80s, I was kind of like, what? And I said, I'm with it. This is it. I got to learn more about this. I got to start figuring out, how I can get a part-time job before or after school to save up money for a turntable. That's how it changed my life, and it continues to do so. Yeah.
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 And furthermore, we see today's technology is obviously advanced, and the
Hmm.
assistance of that makes turntablists' jobs easier, your job easier as you're creating and experimenting in the way. I don't know if this might be like a snobbish question, but do you think that takes away anyone's skill set when they rely more on the techno advance, or is it just a matter of what
Oh no.
you
I
created?
don't I don't actually think I think what an audience is looking for, at least in my experience, is just to see your spirit come through it, no matter what technology you're using.
Mm.
I'm not sure. Um, I don't think you could be a DJ and say you're anti-technology. I mean, everything's
Yeah.
like a turntable is technology. A
Mhm.
violin is technology. It's the idea of how you play it. Personally, I think any um technology is designed at first to quote make your life easier
Mhm.
or make certain tasks more efficient so you have more time to do the things you quote want to do. But I've always been one that just likes work. I just like I like animation, which is also one of those menial tasks, like
Yeah.
like why would you spend the time to do that? Is like, well, I get to stretch time. I get to spend like a whole take that one slice of moment in time in a film and just pour everything I got into that one frame and then the next frame. And then, in a way, it's almost like diving into it and squeezing as much as I can out of each of those moments. The same thing with making records out of tiny slivers of sound. They're like, why would you go to this much trouble or something or so, I don't know. I'm one of those people who goes to say Legoland
Mhm.
and some people would be like, wow, that's a colossal waste of time. But I'm just like, wow, somebody had a vision here to make all this. And you can see all the components. And I think what inspires me about it is the time. It's that human dedication to something, not the fact that, oh, some robot just came and just did it really fast. That doesn't impress me as much as somebody choosing to say, hey, I'm gonna maybe go about this like a different way, like like Seurat's impressionist painting where he did everything in pointillism and it's literally the size of a wall and he spent 2 years doing it, and you're kind of looking at it saying, wow, what would possess somebody to decide to create art this way? But here we are, hundreds of years later, still looking at it being like, it's kind of a beautiful thing, you know? Like I when I saw that painting in person, I just feel like that's this person's life energy here, at least 2 years of it, you know,
it's supposed
and
to
you
make
can
you feel
feel
vision.
it. You can feel it in the painting. And I think it's the same thing with scratching. It's like when you see someone who's just super dope. It's like anything. You're just you watch and then you're kind of just inspired by it. Maybe not inspired to start scratching yourself or something. Whenever you see something like executed on that kind, or whenever I see something that's executed on that level, it could be somebody like it's, you know, doing something acrobatic at the Olympics, or someone made a film, or someone built something out of Lego. It's the same thing to me. So it's more like that part of it
Mhm.
that I'm interested in. And so I personally feel like if the technology comes in and takes all that work away from you, then what's left to do? I would be bored. You know?
Right.
It's almost like, well, now what? Now we have all this free time. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, I personally like the challenge. I think in scratching, especially, what happens is I remember when they developed a mixer that would make certain scratches easier because they made like a quick throw shortcut fader and stuff, which
Mhm.
made, say, transform scratching easier. That at the time was like the most difficult cut you could learn. And then they came up with this mixer that, quote, made it easier. But then the DJs just got bored. Well, okay, well, anyone who just picks this up after a week can transform what used to take 6 months. And I think the scene itself is so hungry and trying to be reinventing like new styles and creating new techniques and just new phrases and new vocabulary. They developed the crab scratch off this fader, which is literally impossible on any previous mixer. So you see, at that point now, we're 10, 20 years later, and that's part of the main vocabulary of scratching now, that technique, you know. So I think it just continues to be this sort of human versus machine kind of race. So
Yeah.
they can try to make stuff easier for them. We're just going to try to outthink the machine every time, you know, just because otherwise you get bored.
Yeah.
Like, why are we even here?
And that hunger for something new. It's I think I notice that's a new way I think the new generation consumes music is they want what's new, they want what's trendy, they want it now. And
Mhm.
how do you think that affects, especially going forward? Always trying to own up yourself. Is that sustainable? I worry about the future
Hmm.
of artists with constantly in that mentality.
It's interesting. I mean, this might be a bit of an aside, but I think about some of our productions that we're doing, like Newphonia Must Fall or the Storyville Mosquito. It's like 15 people on stage, 8 cameras, 75 puppets, 20 miniature sets, a film front to back with a string quartet and live turntable and piano. And more often than not, I get like for places that we haven't visited. I mean, these tours are still active.
Right.
Places I haven't visited, I get messages saying, it's like, when are you going to release the DVD? And I kind of cheekily answer, why? Do you have a DVD player? You know, because they so, but the idea of everything being like accessible at this touch of a button, you know, and I said, well, that's not actually the experience. The point of this show is that we're doing it live in front of very eyes. We're making this film from scratch on stage and on screen in that theater live, and we treasure that experience with that audience each night. Like, we don't have anything, nothing's pre-recorded. We have to build it from scratch every night. And that, I don't know, that's kind of sacred to me a little bit. You know, I'm sure someday, maybe after we've done the show like 1,000 times, I'll be like, you know what, we should film this and maybe put it somewhere. But right now, I love the fact that you have to leave your house and come to the theater to witness it, or else just miss it. It's okay. You know what I mean? There's plenty of other things you could be doing or watching. Um, but for me personally, I love the fact that it's live, and I protect like keeping that live in
Right.
terms of, we'll even adjust the show depending on what country we're in, what city we're in. We'll add different sets, like localize the sets, bring in local winks to just let people know in the audience, hey, this show is for you. It's not the same show we just did last night in Mexico City or in Iceland or in Japan 2 months ago. Every show, I just want to like kind of celebrate that moment, the live aspect of it. And to me, that comes back to scratching. What I love about scratching is the first time I heard it was I didn't know how these sounds were being made. I was hearing it over the speakers in a record store, but I could tell from the energy that someone was performing it. Someone took this sentence, chopped it up, and was able to stutter certain syllables and rewind and rhythmically create this new, pattern out of it. And they're playing it. How are they doing that? And again, that was the part that drew me to it. It was just that somebody practiced to learn to do this, and it sounds so fresh, and it sounds so in the moment, like any musical performance, right? So yeah, the idea of what you're talking about, feeding the content wheel or something like that.
Yeah, it's growing and growing.
In a way, I've never stopped working. I'm always creating, always making stuff. But whether it's for something to be consumed and sort of forgotten about versus, maybe we do something in a theater, a theater piece that people come to, and then they talk to me even like 10 years later saying I'm still talking about that show. That's the type of, I don't know, stuff I want to be working on personally. But that said, I'm not again, have you heard my first mixtape? That was like already short attention span. So I can't, I'd be a hypocrite to say, oh yeah, and that was something completely different. We just switched channels and stuff on that mixtape all over the place, and that was the point, right? It wasn't like I can say, oh, everything has to be a 3-minute pop song or longer, or it changes. But personally, I think the challenge for me now is that even with scratching, like, can you do something like a 1-hour theater piece or a 3-minute song on turntables? Can you get it to in a shape where people are like can be brought on a little journey with it in that time? I'm actually going the opposite direction. I think just like, I know scratching we can fit a lot of scratching in a really short period of time. I'm trying to see if I can, use scratching to tell a longer form story or a longer read, if to use a journalistic term, maybe, like the long reads. You enjoy that you actually get to sink your teeth into something, So yeah.
Well, you spoke about having something for people to come back to, and in 2001 you worked with Dan the Automator, Mike Patton, Charles. You guys released Lovage, Music to Make Your Lady Bite. Is there a chance that we'll see the return of that group in the future by any chance?
I mean, there's always a chance. It's not usually up to the scratch DJ to make that.
I didn't ask.
Yeah. I would love to. That was a really fun tour. I think we only did 12 cities, I think, with Lovage. But it was a great time. It was definitely a great dynamic with having Mike and Jennifer as like kind of two lead singers, playing off of each other in that way. I think last time I talked to Dan, he said he was up for it too. So I guess it's really just trying to see if we can get all the other parties involved to want to come into the studio. But there's always a chance, with Dan's projects, he's also working all the time, and sometimes I'll be surprised. I'll just be over in the Bay Area and he'll just play me something. I'm like, what's this? He's like, oh, he'll have like a whole kind of album sketched out already and be like, oh, what's this for? He's like, I don't know yet. What do you think? Yeah, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, I'm gonna vote for Lovage next time I'm there for you.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. And similarly, your other familiar collaborators, the Slew, your project with Chris Ross and Miles Heskett, are there any plans?
And Dynamite D, yeah, Dynamite D is the main cat there. He's the DJ from Seattle. Originally was the two of us. Then we brought in LSDJ, rest in peace, from Seattle, and then Chris Ross, Miles Heskett, and P Love were actually part of the live unit. So when that record was done and we had to tour it, Chris Ross and Miles from formerly of Wolf Mother kind of joined our live crew, and then P Love is a phenomenal scratch DJ who I've toured with several times, and so they're all like, and now it's just like one big family. So, yes, is there going to be more Slew stuff? I absolutely hope so. We have already like the skeletal versions of I'd say like 14 tracks, but again, the issue right now more than anything is like scheduling, plus vicinity in terms of Chris and Miles are in Australia and P Love's in New York, Dylan's in Seattle, I'm here in Montreal. So now that things are opening up again, hopefully we'll all be able to just get back in the studio together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, I know you have a new album you just released, and as an icon in this industry, you've talked about it, you've experimented and explored with this genre, and I want to know more. You've touched on it already, but more about the process to decide which genres within this new album you decided to showcase.
Oh, right. So I think it started from the music side, just exploring recording and writing techniques and seeing what kind of tones I was getting, kind of creating a then palette of sounds to work from. And some of them just started pushing in a certain direction. So one might head towards like a 50s, 60s like jukebox tune, while another might sound like more of a a ska 7-inch or something. And really it started just me trying to see if I can make the turntable bend into these areas. And as the tones started to come back, I was playing all the instruments in the studio. But like, say for Jump and Shuffle is a perfect example. I actually was able to acquire a secondhand Soundcraft Series 1 console. I'm about to nerd out here, but here we go. So this is the console that Lee Scratch Perry used in his studio, and they had one at CBGB's in New York, like back in the era. So it was this kind of little console that everyone knew had this crunchy tone to it. So the first thing, once I got it back in the studio, I said, I want to see if I overdrive all the preamps, whether I'll get that sort of blocky, crunchy sound and it did that exactly that. So I was like, oh, whoa, yeah, I want to make a turntable ska tune now, like, but through this console, and overdrive every layer and see if I can get that 7-inch, dub sound that I love. And that was really just having fun pushing the equipment and the turntable through that equipment into those areas. So it started first with just the kind of letting the playing around on the different tracks, and every instrument I had in my studio, like, could be drums going through a certain compressor and then through a certain reverb, and it felt like, oh, hey, that feels like a doo-wop drum sound or something, and then that kind of just led it to go in that direction on one track. So I had these sort of a few started, but at one point I realized that there was a connection possibly for this time that I was in the studio. There might have been a thread I could tie through it, and that was when simultaneously I was working on the artwork and the board game, and I was painting all these creatures. So I was painting or here, this is one of the drawings I was doing. It's like a scratchboard drawing.
Oh.
So I was painting like like a mantis on SP1200, and another crustacean on a clavinet, and a turtle on timpanis, just having fun. But I was also doing the paintings, which ended up being in the board game. Do you have a copy of it, by the way?
Of the board game itself?
Yeah.
I actually don't.
I'm gonna send you one. I got to send you one.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. No. Come on. Like, otherwise it's just heresy. So the record, it has all of these creatures,
right,
that I was painting in the studio. So they were beginning to populate my actual physical space in the studio. I had like dozens of these creatures, just paintings in various forms of completion, holding instruments. And then I'd go into the studio and I would say, oh, what kind of sound would that sloth, make on a fuzz bass? Like what kind of bass line? So these creatures started informing me a little bit. They became my muse of like what
Mhm.
kind of sounds would they make if they started a band. And at one point when it really clicked was when I realized it's like, oh, this album can be the soundtrack to the next stage production, like in the style of Storyville Mosquito, in the style of Newphonium Must Fall Alive. So I said, okay, so if that's the case, then what kind of show or film are we going to create this time? And the answer was an action movie. And the second that kind of decision was made, it became very clear. It's like, oh, I need something in the third act. I need like a final battle showdown track. So Rise of the Tardigrades is that, in the opening, I need something really punchy and for the opening credits. And so that's Here Now. And this song is great to introduce this character and that character. And then there's a little heist sequence. Like I need some kind of sneaky, you know,
Yeah.
Scooby-Doo style music in this point, while they're trying to sneak into the whatever, and hack into the mainframe or whatever. So there was all these things that were kind of just I was just realizing, oh, this is where some of these experimental tracks could fit together if the story, as the story started to congeal. It was like it was telling me, oh, you need a track here for this motorcycle chase. So highs, lows, and highways was that, or for the love story, like, what can we put to be the heart of their, their meeting and their date montage or whatever. And so When You Say Love, the instrumental version, even though it started from outside of the story, ended up being like, oh, that actually fits really well there. So I kind of had musically supervised all my sessions to see if it could fit into this soundtrack in my mind. And none of this will make any sense until people see the show in 2 years. But I do think as an album, you can just listen to it as an album and it goes all these places, Yeah.
And it sounds like so you already touched on the board game itself, but the music seems to help outline the story itself, or was there some elements of the story kind of like just a rough bones of a outline of acts and then the
Yeah,
music helps bring it up?
exactly. So I've already boarded the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so while my brain was in this world and these creatures were on the, these creature paintings were on the walls and I was working on music, it just started to, harmonize, at least as far as like concept for me. And so, yeah, some of those tracks are kind of meant to be specific music cues for some of the storyboards, which isn't in the artwork. Like I said, no one's going to see that until the show's out. But that said, I still listen to it front to back, saying, okay, does it go on this sort of adventure? Are there these moments of of does it balance in terms of, okay, we just did this really dark tune where I introduced the villain of the story, but for someone who's listening and not thinking about a story, like, is there some way to bring some levity to the tone of the album so it just doesn't totally turn into some, other, like, I wanted to keep it balanced in
Yeah.
terms of some of the stuff that's like more moody in tone with some of the more playful, quirky stuff. And really I have very kind of cartoony scenes in my mind for each of the tracks. But again, I'm not sure that'll it makes perfect sense in my mind right now. It will probably make more sense when people see the show, but in the meantime, like, I hope they just enjoy the record as a kind of audio adventure.
I could speak to that sentiment that I could feel the story moving in my mind. So I think that was
Yeah.
it came off for me. I
Oh,
mean,
thank
that's
you.
the
Thank
best
you.
part of music. I love when there's a story and I love to follow the rabbit. I like to be Alice and follow the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Did that,
Yeah,
so yes. And
absolutely.
more on just these different creative processes. I want to know, do they differ depending on your role you're in, whether, if you're the performer role to composing to theater production? How do those work together, differ?
I think, with the new productions, they are multifaceted. It's music, it's live performance, it's scratching, it's film scoring, it's comedy, it's drama, it's all that. Um, yeah, I think it's just me trying to create that sandbox where like all my favorite things are in the sandbox, including this wonderful team of like talented, artists that I get to collaborate with and perform with, in those shows. Like I spent a lot of time, I spent like decades just DJing by myself, which is fun. Don't get me wrong. I still love rocking parties in that method, but once I got a taste of like, hey, if we all, 15 of us like work together, and we're talking, oh, there's cinematographers, there's a string trio, or a string quartet, like what other kinds of moods, like it forced me to kind of figure out even new ways to play the turntable to support those. So there's really like poignant emotional moments in those shows. There's very like suspenseful action packed moments in the shows, and then very comedic moments in the shows, and I have fun with I don't know, to me, like the rule was like if we're at rehearsal and we're not laughing every 5 minutes, then we're doing it wrong. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things, like I'm just trying to create some fun while we're working on in the process, but then also, present something fun for people to go to and experience. Yeah.
Right. And I think that segues perfectly into that. It was mentioned that this album's notable theme was around creating things to joyfully connect people. And
Yes.
I want to know, other than that, like what was the motivation behind that?
What's the motivation behind that? My very, very first recollection of that even being a thing was watching a Charlie Chaplin film when I was 5 or 6 with my mom and my grandparents and my sister. So my mom said, "Hey, we're gonna watch a movie as a family, and we're gonna grandma's gonna watch it." And my grandmother didn't speak any English or anything, you know. And grandma's gonna watch it. Your sister's gonna watch it. Your dad and I are gonna watch it. We're all gonna watch it. And. And I was just being a bratty kid, like, "Oh, come on," like what? And then she started playing Modern Times by Charlie Chaplin. And the movie started, and I said, "What? This is a old timey. The film's not even in color. There's no dialogue. You know." And so I was kind of already not just sort of already already kind of pushing back against it. But within, I think, the first 3 minutes, I just switched. I just was all in. I was like, "Wait, this is funny. What's going on?" I'm trying to solve what's happening here, and piecing it together. And there was no words. It was actually just done in that universal physical acting, and the music kind of can push you emotionally um to feel certain things or like augment certain scenes. But while that movie was going, I very specifically remember my entire family, all three generations, like laughing at the same time, and biting their nails at the same time, or being moved, and be like, during the poignant moments, just being kind of almost a whisper quiet, like the whole and I said, I didn't even know what production was. I didn't know what that was as a child. I was just like, but maybe prior to that, I thought anything that was on TV was just real life. It was like the news, like somebody, right? That's when I realized. I said, no, they created this to create this feeling, and my whole family's enjoying. And it's one of a handful of times that I remember all three generations of my family, like, just being totally enchanted by one piece of art. And at that moment, I knew, like, I kind of knew I didn't know what show business was or anything. I just said, yeah, when I grow up, I want to make something that makes this feeling, whatever's happening in the living room right now, all of us here together, laughing together, being moved by one piece of art together. So it goes way back for me. It's a very, very like deep rooted compulsion to create something that'll do that. I'm not sure I'm there yet, but I keep trying and just trying to have some fun along the way. Yeah.
I mean, there's multiple options of productions, so I think
Yeah.
there's many ways that you're getting there. And
Yeah.
varying all those, as we talked about, storytelling techniques, some are more interactive than the others,
Mm-hmm.
others more theater, traditional style,
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned how, depending on where you go, you guys make it a point to make it local, make it relatable in that area. Um, how do you maintain a cohesive story to shine through each iteration?
Well, yeah, I think the core story and scenes and story beats are still the same, but I think when we talk about localizing one of the shows, it can sometimes be very simple, like just shouting out the local cuisine, you know, maybe one of the storefronts becomes that. It's enough for people to realize it's like, whoa, okay, wait, I'm not just watching some CG here. Somebody actually built that and they went and visited that establishment, you know, tried to design it to look like that and have that feeling. And so for us, I think there's a way of going on tour where you just stay in your hotel room and you don't actually engage with with the city itself. And I think with that tour, especially since we're in a city, usually we stay for a few days or a week. We actually have some time to get out there, after we've set up everything. We're like, okay, let's go explore, let's see what this town's about, like. And the local hosts will just show us around, and yeah, during that we're just trying to just be present and celebrate that, and then of course bring it back into the show, just to just have some fun with that. And the audience usually kind of enjoy those localization moments. It's because the story itself is, I mean, you're usually very universal. Say in Euphonia was about, it's about a robot trying to write love songs, but really kind of just a metaphor for like finding your voice or getting your out of your own way, in your head mentally before you can, tap into that the good stuff. And same with Mosquito, the idea of like moving to someplace new and learning and facing adversity, but then trying to find a community that understands, what you're trying to do. And so these are very like universal,
Yeah.
sometimes even tropey storylines, but at the same time, I think because there's a familiarity there, that the characters themselves can be quite fantastic. Like it could be a mosquito, it could be a robot, it could be, and people relate to it almost like they feel for it. I mean, some people after the shows, they'll say, hey, how'd you make the robot cry? And we're like, we didn't make the robot cry, like, you made the robot cry. Like you were feeling that, you were projecting whatever experiences you had, or you had, because the characters don't talk, right? There's music kind of pushing it along, but I think people have to sort of mirror their experiences onto that character, and I try to make characters that are just like, hopefully good things that well, any character, I guess, is that you'd want it to be relatable. You know what I mean?
You
Yeah.
see themselves in them. That's
Yeah, just or
inspiring.
like I've experienced that personally, or I know someone who has, or something. It's not just like, hey, I'm here to show you some really avant-garde stuff that you leave going like, I don't know what that was. It was, you know what I mean? I think these shows are designed to just, yeah, I guess, connect. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Between these different shows, would you say there's one that's more easier to perform or one that's more challenging?
Ooh. Um, th- you mean from a technical level, or just just as a energy. It's
How about both?
uh they're different in a way. Like say satellite turntable orchestra is one where the X factor is like the margin is like way larger because the actual audience is performing the music with us. So everybody is seated at their own turntable stations. They have like color coded harmony records that we cue via these colored like these LED lights that can change the color. So say your turntable station turns purple, then you have to find the purple record and like cue it up between. So there's always like a margin of drift in terms of like how quote accurate the audience is playing. But that said, I think that we've kind of dialed it in up where it always still sounds good in terms of the feeling of the song is still there, and the audience brings in their crescendos and their other harmonies, and they, like a choir would, you know. But then of course there's always a couple rogue turntable stations that are just either they play the wrong record, they're scratching all the time or whatever, and that actually adds some musical interest to it. Like personally, I feel it. I feel that energy, and but it's not. I wouldn't say it's difficult. I would just say I'm surprised at how different every group that would come in to say satellite turntable orchestra. We just did 7 shows a couple weeks ago in one city, and every performance had a different kind of way of playing, which was cool. Like I actually liked that, you know. And different in terms of like not in the way you would expect, like some of the afternoon shows where there were a lot of families. You know, some people might think, oh, that those must have been really chaotic because the kids must have just went like nutsoid and like broke all the needles. I'm like, no, actually the kids were very, very like focused and could, you know, we have my Felix, he's sort of conducting as well. So the lights turn on, that tells you what record to cue, but then he's also conducting like in terms of dynamic volumes and stuff like that. And even he was saying, oh, the afternoon shows, like it was almost like dialed in, like they you know, maybe it's like the later shows people are just drunk and they're just having a good time, which is fine. But there was like a tone difference, like literally, oh, the show that had where all the tables were families and had half kids like operating the turntables, there was a sort of naive focus about it that was actually very like beautiful to hear, you know. And then similarly the late Saturday night party rocking shows had this sort of more kind of brash sound.
Yeah.
And it was fun. Like I play off of that. Like it's almost like, you know, if you're what I imagine if you're in a stand-up club and then there's like a lot of hecklers or something, you can actually play off that energy and create like things on the spot, which is fun, you know. So that's sort of that dynamic was interesting, you know. And I just love that. I love the fact that the shows don't, you know, you don't have to be this cookie cutter like, oh, we're just doing the same set over and over again 7 times. Like no, you can feel different ways. Yeah,
We dwindled down to our final 2 questions. I
sure.
know that you're going on tour with Lealani, and I wanted to know
Mhm.
more about that collaboration.
So
What's
right. So I was working on creatures and I had this track written called Things Are Gonna Change. And then through a mutual friend, I was introduced to her work. And when I heard her voice, I said, oh, she's got that riot girl voice, that kind of, you know, power puff energy that this track needs. Like that really clear shout voice. And I said, oh, you know, this could work. So I reached out to her, and she, funnily enough, had attended the new Phonia Must Fall show a few years ago, and so I was kind of already on her radar a bit. And so it was just that it was pretty easy. I said, hey, you know, would you be down to like shout on this track? And then she agreed. And yeah, I had so much fun working on that track that I said, hey, let's try, do a couple shows together and see how it goes. And yeah, it's a cool chemistry. I mean, first of all, let's first just talk about her for a second. I think she's like a phenom. Like she writes, produces, releases, does her own artwork. You know, she can sing. She has her own one girl punk band too, which I also love, called the Pez Heads. Um, so I was just like, wow, that's she's like the whole package, real deal. But then when we worked on the track together, I was like, oh, there's a cool dynamic here where if we broke it down like in the tradition of like duo bands, like say, like White Stripes or Black Keys or something like that, it was like, how much noise can two people make? But in this case, instead of drums and guitar, it's like turntable and MPC. And so we're having fun just kind of exploring um what that could evolve into. We've only done like a handful of shows together so far, but we're always like before the tour, or, trying a couple things out and then testing it, and then so it's fun. I think we both have interest to write some more stuff together as a duo.
Mhm.
But despite that, I think she everyone should pay attention to what she's doing as a solo artist. It's really annoying how talented she is for someone her age to be
Yeah.
that like already evolved. Like when I heard the Pez Head stuff, I was like, when did you write that? She's like, oh, I wrote that in high school. I'm like, what? And how did you record it? It's like, oh, it was like when she was in college, but those songs were from high. It's like, but they sound like legit punk song, like it had everything it needed already. So I was kind of like, wow, you know, incredible. Yeah.
I can say that's probably really exciting for people to look forward to, is just more of that energy from you both and more of her energy.
Yeah, no, for sure. I want her, like, for me, part of just bringing her on the road is because I kind of feel like just more people need to see what she's doing. Like when I actually saw she was kind of doing the pads live, like no grid, there's nothing. She's doing every single part live while singing on it, beautifully singing on it too, on some of her more electronic-y stuff. I was kind of like, how are you doing that? And I'm a multitasker, as you know, but even then I'm just standing back and I'm like, what? How? Yeah.
But lastly, as we touched on it slightly, but any other future projects in the works fans can, look forward to.
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing would be we're going to start doing these creature board game events. That's just a fun afternoon thing to actually, we'll have, you don't have to bring your board games. We'll bring the board games, and we'll bring the turntable for every table of four. And just I thought it would be fun to as a fun afternoon thing to do. So we're going to start doing that in a few cities. Yeah, Lealani and I have some more like the night club shows together. And then yes, the Creatures of the Late Afternoon stage production is sort of in its prototype
Mhm.
storyboard uh era now. So that it's not really going to premiere for at least another 2 years probably. Currently we're actually on tour with Storyville Mosquito.
Mhm.
With the pandemic, everything kind of got
Yeah.
pushed. So right now we're just sort of continuing, or rather just starting our Storyville Mosquito tour. So that will be hitting a number of cities in the next 2 years, a lot, like all over. And finally, my day job right now is actually we're in production of my first feature animated film debut. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's yeah, I'm directing uh a CG animated version of Space Cadet, which was my second graphic novel. And so that's actually a full-time thing, right? That's my day job. So
Yeah.
weekends and nights I'm doing music, but in the day we're here, we're in the design phase. We're about to start animation, and so that is also like on the front burner at the moment. But more news on that soon. But yeah, everything's kind of moving from. I'm just happy to be able to work with such rad people and getting out into the on tour again after almost 3-year hiatus was just it's wonderful to just see people out again dipping their toes into like, oh, okay, do I even like live music or live experiences anymore? And to find out that they do, it's like great. I think that's a wonderful feeling.
It's amazing to have all these creative projects after such a bleak time, and that's what saved us. I think I will always say that that's what saved people during that time is all these creative art that people like you were willing to share with the world to take the time to. So
Oh,
it's amazing that there's so much to look forward to and continue to look forward to.
yeah, yeah.
I want to thank you one more time for sitting down with me and just having this great conversation about your new projects, what you have lined up,
Thank
and
you.
just your role in this industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So I want to send you the record. Where should I send it? Is there a you want to throw it in the chat or
Yeah,
something? Or
I will throw my address. Let me put it in the chat right now. That's so awesome. I'm so
yeah, and then you could try the board game and everything.
yes.
Because you need the vinyl to play I mean, obviously the board game is the record jacket, but then also the vinyl, I don't know if you know this, but the vinyl itself has like hidden tracks on it.
Oh, I did not actually know
Yeah,
that.
so this is the album tracks here, and then I put a lock groove, and then after each lock groove, there's these board game tracks that only come on the vinyl. And so during certain moments in the game, you're supposed to play the soundtrack either as a timer,
Mhm.
like or something. It is the musical soundtrack and timer. So hold on, I'm just gonna write.
No worries. That is actually really neat. I actually did not know that little tidbit. So that
Yeah, it's
even
fun.
more fun and exciting for this
Yeah,
oh my gosh. I love each little intricate detail. It's amazing.
I hope you have a lot of fun with it
Oh
too.
yes. I'm visiting some
You
friends.
can have yeah, it's up to 4 players, so you can just like get a
Oh
crew
yeah.
over okay, let me think of this. Mhm. I will send that out today.
So much. That's so honored. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And that's my name on the same as my mailing address I sent. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. All
Thank you
right.
for sitting down with us at
Yes.
mxdwn.
All
Have a
right.
good one, okay?
We'll see you later.
See you
Okay.
later. Bye.
Bye.